Hey everybody! I wanted to make this quick video to go over some of the tricks and tips that I use to establish this new tank. This is day 3 of the tank, and as you can see I have the inhabitants in here. The tank is nice and clear, but why is it stocked already? Why is there no bacteria bloom? What's going on? I've got fluval stratum in here, I've got dragonstone. What gives? Well, I'm going to tell you what gives. I'm going to tell you some tips I use that I gathered over the internet, kind of scoured around, and I applied these tips from people who know what they're doing. Shout out the small Scape. PrimeTime Aquatics, KG Tropicals, MD Fish Tanks. I'll shout people out till I die, because these people have been super helpful. Just little bits and pieces of information kind of gathered along the way, my own personal experience. This is my 4th tank, and I feel like now I have some advice that I can impart on those of you who might be considering setting up your 2nd tank. First tank, this wouldn't necessarily apply because you sort of need the 1st tank to help set up the 2nd tank. So number 1, and I'm just going to let you watch the fish as I label these and name them off. Prepare your hardscape properly. So preparing your hardscape isn't just if it's dragonstone, especially. Dragonstone will come from the store, even if it says pre-washed. It's covered in mud. It's pretty soft, so it will crumble easily. And you will notice if you put it in a bucket, I use a clean mop bucket that I always use for anything fish tank related. And I soak it, and you soak it overnight, and you're literally dumping dirt and mud out. So I was doing a hot water bath in them, spraying them, letting it cool, dumping it, refilling it, and then I let the stone soak for 3 days. So this is before I set up the tank, anything. Same with the wood. There's a little wee piece of wood, but I'm using it for another scape. So I let it soak for days. Probably, I would say 2 or 3 days, and some might think this is overkill, and maybe it is, but it works for me. Then I boil the wood, each piece probably around average of 30 minutes. Let it cool, and I put in water again, because the wetter it is and the more water that it has absorbed, the more likely it is to stay at the bottom of your tank when you put it in there instead of floating up to the top. So that's how I prepared my hardscape. Secondly, my challenge was I was using fluval stratum for the first time, and I noticed that some people, when filling their tanks, ended up with chocolate milk. But then others who do a lot of aquascaping and are professionals were filling their tanks without rinsing the fluval stratum at all first, and everything looked nice and clear. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to rinse it, because if the pros aren't rinsing it, there must be a way to do this. So when it came to a really messy substrate and filling the tank, I put a saucer or a small plate. I put like a side plate upside down. Yes, kind of on my plants, but they rebounded back. Just be gentle. And all the water I poured into the tank really slowly. I poured it so it would land on the saucer. And what that does is it disperses the water, and it doesn't go like jet streaming right into your substrate to kick up the dirt. All I had were about 2 little kind of like neat, interesting clumps of fluval stratum that had floated to the top. But it wasn't muddy, it wasn't cloudy. It was just the pieces. So that allowed me to fill this tank without having a speck of cloudiness. Not on the first fill up. It didn't take an hour to clear out. There was absolutely no dust coming off these rocks and nothing coming out of my substrate. It does help that I have black sand and inert substance on top of the fluval stratum, but you can see that it's not covering in all places, and I didn't even, to be honest, rinse the sand, because I knew I was going to let it filter for a day, and I was prepared for a little bit of cloudiness, to be honest. The third thing is, okay, I've got some fish in here already. What gives? Well, the filter media used on this tank right now has been running on another established tank of mine, and this is what I mean by this is going to be helpful for your second tank, because it does jumpstart the process. And I had for 2 months filter media running on a different tank, gathering all that great nitrifying bacteria that's going to help to convert your ammonia and your nitrite into nitrate. And I put that on, and then I still supply the tank with, obviously I use Scape Prime for dechlorinating my water, and it also helps to render ammonia kind of harmless. And I use Stability, or some people might use PrimeTime 7, and that helps to jumpstart the bacteria population. So I still did that even though I had a fully cycled filter. So that is allowing my water parameters to remain stable. Then there's bacteria bloom, and when you start a new tank, it's very common to have bacteria bloom, and it's like a white cloudiness in the water, and you have to let it go away. There's nothing you can do. Water changes will just restart the bacteria bloom process. I had no bacteria bloom in this tank, and credit to preceding the filter media, but then also all of the green plants you see in here actually came from that same established tank. So all of the good bacteria on the plants, all of that great bacteria that you want to be established in an aquarium came with the setup. And if I had tried to do everything brand new, if I was starting from scratch, it would take a lot longer to get the filter going, or to get the tank going, and to have it be balanced and cycled. So what I have here is essentially an established tank that, of course, I'm going to measure my levels, keep a close eye on it, but I'm already seeing new growth after a couple days. Everything is doing really, really well, and the fish are vibrant and happy and excited and getting along really, really well. So I would say those are my top tips. If you are starting your second tank, you are going to win if you put all of the work ahead of time in your pre-planning, making sure you're grabbing things from inside your tank that have beneficial bacteria, adding that extra filter on a tank, or putting the extra filter media in. One trick you can do is if you use sponge, coarse sponge, you can cut it up into smaller pieces and then put however much you need or want, and then you can just take out some select pieces of that coarse foam, and that will help you pop it into a new filter. Also, I started using filter floss. Thank you to PrimeTime Aquatics, because they use it, and they made a really good point. Like, your coarse sponge is great, but it's not going to catch everything. And I certainly was having algae problems in my other tanks. I popped filter floss in, you guys, and the tank was so much clearer the next day, and the floss had caught a whole bunch of algae. It's just dead that was like laying on the bottom of the tank, and it was getting brought into the filter, but it was getting spat back out. So filter floss. In my filter, I literally just threw a big chunk of the coarse foam, and then I put some new filter floss on top. Simple, simple, simple. And this is what I've got. So I let it run for 24 hours on its own. The next day, I added the giant heater that comes with top fin sets. I added it after I raised my substrate at the back, so that was a bit of a challenge. But I have a big Monstera plant here, so I let it cover the tank and cover that hideous looking heater there. That's very large. I don't know. But anyway, this is my tank. It's happy, it's thriving, and the plants, the fish, everything. And those are the #1 tips I can give you. So let me know in the comments below if you have any other questions. But I will continue to try and hop on and just say, hey, you know what? I was working on this, and I noticed A, B, and C worked really well for me. D, E, F did not work well for me. And I'll let you guys know, because I'm not a pro, I'm not a noob, I'm somewhere in between, probably closer to the noob side. I'm about a year or so into this hobby, but I've been studying intensely and really, really enjoying it. So hopefully my tips can help you too. See you later, guys.